I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is a sad clown.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Shout out to our sponsors. Major Team Mortgage, Omaha Laser Dentistry, Exclusively Eye Care, Liberty Core Real Estate, Avier Wealth Management, and Apex Men's Clinic. We appreciate their support.
Are you or someone you know in the market to buy a new home? Well, if so, check out Major Team Mortgage at Exarban Mortgage. They specialize in home purchase and refinance home loans. Their mission is to purposely empower people to experience their good life through building wealth with real estate. You know, showing up in the gloom is no different than showing up for a conversation around your future of building wealth with real estate. Join the action economy and get in the game with Sasquatch. Text or call John at 402-212-0149 to schedule a time today. NMLS number 139375, equal housing lender.
Now let's get back to the gloom.
And we're back. I don't know if it's fitting. We've got this guy on, and it's April. It's almost tax day, and I've got Taxman on the gloom this morning. And man, it's just good to see you. I miss you,
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited to get back. I don't know. I don't have a trip planned back to Omaha yet, but I'll be out as soon as we do. You better bet I'll be out.
Awesome, man. Well, excited to dive into your story and just where we like to start off, kind of who EH'd you, what was the first workout like, and then how did we name you Taxman?
Yeah. So Milo actually EH'd me. He was in the position that I'm in now, but up in Omaha for working for First Command. And hey, there's this group. We were driving back from Iowa on some long drive, and he was like, we work out in the mornings, and both of us were military. He's like, there is a faith part, don't let that freak you out though, because he didn't know we're in a very professional setting, so we didn't talk about that a whole lot. So he was like, I don't want, and that did kind of make me a little nervous because and we'll get into that, but yeah, it's always been very personal to me, not very public. So anyways, it took a little while for me to come out, but eventually decided to. And Animal House was on the queue, so it was down at the Sandlot or whatever they're calling it now, the 47 names from that site. So the whole workout took place in about a 15-yard box. And yeah, Animal House freaking got after it. It was a blast. So, I don't think I was the sixth, but I was next to him.
Yeah.
So it had been some time since I worked out. And yeah, it was a really good workout. So I really enjoyed that. It was a little like, okay, where am I? What's going on here? This is weird. So because I was just very used to the military, it's very organized, and the gloom is the opposite. It's chaos, right? Like it's
trying to be like the military in some aspects, but yeah.
Right. But in a lot of ways not, which was great. And so it was just very, it was not familiar at all, which was good. And at some point during the workout, somebody had asked me what I was doing, and I told them, and I had only been on the Marine Corps for about a year at that point. So that was still very much my identity. And I said, I'm a financial planner now with First Command, whatever. But before that, I was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. And they were like, oh, that's so cool. Thank you for your service. I was like, thanks for paying your taxes. I got to do a lot of cool stuff. And they were like, that's the best answer to that we've ever heard, which is true, right? Like I had an insane 4 years. I got to do more than most people could ever dream of. And that'll stick with me forever. But anyway, so they thought that was hilarious. So comes time for Name-A-Rama, stand in the middle. I don't remember what I said. I heard that somebody was like armbar, and what was another one? Some jiu-jitsu and stuff, call signs. So I said that I grew up wrestling, like doing that stuff, whatever, hoping to get that. And it was like, nope, Taxman, that's your call sign. They had to tell the story because not everybody heard it in the workout. So like, why are we going to name him Taxman? So, but it stuck. My wife gave me a heart. She was like, first of all, you have a call sign. You have a new name. What is that? That's weird. And you're Taxman. Like, she was certainly skeptical to start.
What are you doing?
Like, supportive. But she was like, what is this group you've joined? So that was my first workout. And actually, so I kind of forgot about this. I was thinking about this last night. I took some notes and listened to Fine Print, his podcast. I've been listening to the podcast, but I did 75 hard like day 2 after I joined F3. Like I knew, I was like, all right, I need a good bit of hazing. It's been about a year since I got out of the Marine Corps, so I'm going to do that. That sounds horrendous and fun. So I went to every beatdown for 75 days in a row, pretty much. So I jumped right in full force. Didn't keep up with it, like ebbed and flowed a little bit. And then towards probably around the 1 year mark, I started getting more steady, and just, hey, it doesn't have to be every day.
For sure.
Which is hard for me.
Yeah.
I like jumping in 100%.
Yeah, I love it, man. And I do appreciate that response. I like to say thank you for your service, but I love your thanks for paying for your taxes.
Yeah.
Man. That's hilarious. What?
Yeah. And my shield lock definitely knows too, but because we did a couple of breakfasts and I just told them stories and they were like, what is your life? Like, you at 26 and me at 26 are very different things.
We'll have to get into that here as we keep going. I'm curious though, from just a fitness perspective, was you feel like, because you were in the Marines, so from a fitness perspective, what was your was it a difficult workout? Do you feel like it kind of helped you get back into better shape, or what was your experience there?
Yeah, I think so. I have the opposite problem, and I think a lot of people, which is mentally, I believe I can do it. Physically, I may not be able to. Like I had broken, I had just done some pretty insane physical feats while in the Marine Corps. I carried a 180-pound pack and machine gun and everything else for 8 miles. And doing stuff like that, right? Just having 100 pounds of gear on you for, weeks at a time, you get very comfortable with that. So you turn into a little bit of a diesel engine. So you get like a little pouch, little belly, but you can go forever, right? Like you just are able to go indefinitely. So the workouts were all very familiar to me. They were kind of like what our squad leaders would do and that kind of stuff, which was cool. So very familiar, but I didn't have to lead them anymore, which I really liked. Obviously once you cue and everything else, but I liked that I could just show up and participate and didn't have to think so much about like, okay, how am I going to control this chaos? At least initially. So that was really, I definitely appreciated that. But I mean, I was part of the endurance team at college. I ran a marathon with no training 2 weeks after I got out of the Marine Corps, which is a terrible idea. That was a ridiculous story, but just like, so I'll do stuff like that. That's definitely not good for me probably in the long run, but I had always enjoyed that stuff. So, and that's really been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is it doesn't have to be that way. You can just, work out at a more regular pace and change habits over the long term. It's probably better for you anyways. So, but fitness wise, I mean, I made a lot of improvements certainly. And just, I think the biggest thing for me from a fitness standpoint was seeing really cool examples of people at different points in their life maintaining their fitness. My dad is also 1099, worked for himself, and he was a professional boxer actually. So he was in great shape for most of his life, but then he just kind of put on some extra weight, and he's in construction. So he was always really strong. He was just carrying a little extra weight, and he wasn't working out because he's working his butt off to send all of us to Catholic schools and everything else. So he didn't work out until recently. He finally, like, all the kids are out of the house.
So he's got the time.
Everything's paid off. So now he has time, and he's like, why aren't you working out? I'm like, Dad, I don't know if you remember this, but when you were starting a business, right, like you also didn't work out. But it is a good reminder, right? Like that's his lesson learned. That's his way of telling me to keep on, basically. And I mean, there's people in my industry like JC that obviously maintains a super high level of fitness, but just, there's so many of you guys that were great examples for me of, hey, this is a professional who also is able to
Yeah.
maintain that peace.
Well, I'm curious,
So
from a like F3 perspective, were you able to do, so you did 75 hard? Did you get into pre-running, or what were some of the other things that you found helpful for you?
yeah, I did a little bit of pre-running, not very much, not as much as I would like. I had a lot of issues
Mm.
with my feet. So I entered the Marine Corps with high arches and I left with
Okay.
flat feet.
Nice. Nice.
And maybe it's those hikes, right? I don't know. There may be some correlation there. So I really liked running. I mean, I ran a marathon, right? Like the mental game is
Yeah.
I'm good with it, but then like 2 or 3 days later, I'm like just hobbling around, just kind of a mess. So, and part of that was I'm carrying extra weight and all that other stuff. So it's like, okay, I need to do this.
Yeah,
Drop
you're
my
good.
mouse. Yeah. So I need to do this more gradually, right? So that I can, maintain, not injure myself, all that, because I will injure
Right.
myself, you know, because I'm too stupid to quit.
Where do you think that comes from? Is that something you learned in the Marine Corps, or is that just how you were raised, or is
Yeah,
that sort of mind over
I would
matter?
say, yeah, combination of the two. I mean, I saw like, yeah, my dad has been a great, mentor in that regard where it's like, look, you don't have to necessarily be the smartest person in the room, but if you can outwork, 80% of people, you'll be very
Hmm.
successful. And that, then translated really well in the Marine Corps, where some of that stuff that I did was definitely a weed out school. Like infantry officers course is legit. Um, it's, I have heard much harder than Ranger school, but
Hmm.
different. They feed us as much as you want because it doesn't matter. You still have to be able to hike with 150 freaking pounds on
Yeah.
your back. Like it's tough. So in any case, though, just that mentality of and the leadership that I had like so much of my college time in preparation for joining the Marine Corps was heavily focused on leadership, and I read so many books on young infantry officers, how to take over, young SEALs, Green Berets, all those guys, and just kind of the mentality that goes into that. And um, I wrestled for a
Hmm.
long time growing up, and was never that good, and that
Yeah.
was hard. I mean, yeah, I never made varsity
Oh,
at
wow.
prep, and yeah, just and I was a good wrestler, like if I had been in a different class school or whatever, but that was very humbling. But I kept doing it, and it really did, it paid off in so many ways. Just that mentality more than anything, because that I found was unique. It's like half of it is just being able to keep coming back, just never
Yeah.
say die. So
Man, that's such an important lesson. I'm working on that with my oldest right now, of like, when things get hard, you don't, that's not when you quit, right? Because the reward of pushing
right,
through that challenge is so
yeah,
much greater, Yeah.
yeah,
W-
yeah. Happiness is just outside your
Yeah.
comfort zone. Like there's tons of get comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
all that stuff, and that there's a little bit of being a grunt, being an infantryman, that you gotta love the misery. I mean, there's just some miserable
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
like being cold and it's raining and you gotta hike. It's like, well, we gotta move or dig a hole and sleep in it, and it's gonna fill up with water at about 2 in the morning. I'm gonna wake up choking. Like, I mean, just
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Hey, as I'm hearing you share some of your military background, I think you had a chance to do an episode on the Between Two Coupons, right?
I did, yeah. That was a lot of fun
Yeah.
to film.
How was that,
Yeah,
or what was the? And that was more of a tribute to some of the men that have.
yeah. I think we did that around Veterans Day.
Yeah.
I want to say, and Marine Corps birthday. Um, Yeah, because there was a lot of Marines on there, that's the Midwest is Marine Corps
Yeah.
haven. Yeah, we like to work, so that was a blast. I really enjoyed that, and it was cool to see very different experiences and what the guys had gotten out of it. Because I think I was the only infantry guy, so it was cool to see just what the other guys' experiences were, and a lot of them had combat deployments as
Yeah.
well. So being able to talk to them was cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I never could find it. I looked on YouTube for it. I'll have to
Yeah.
dig again because I was like, maybe they didn't air it because I think I took over and probably said drop too many swear words. I mean, it
I'll,
was, yeah, it would have been heavily
I'll
edited.
look for it and see if I can put it in the show notes for this because I think it was
Okay.
you, Gunnar Knobs, and maybe Yogi.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and there were some really good stories. You guys go into detail, and you know, like I'm
Yeah.
I've never been in the military, so most of your
Right.
stories, I'm sort of like, oh my god, I can't believe. But you know,
Yeah.
I think the other sort of piece as we're talking through your journey in F3, you mentioned shield lock, but that fellowship
Mhm.
piece, I mean, you know, talk us through that. How did you go about building those relationships outside of just Milo, who was a work colleague?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, I mean, I knew I needed it. So I'd read Tribe by Sebastian Younger. I've always been very aware of that need in my life. Like right after I got out of the Marine Corps and while I was studying for my series exams, I was rolling jujitsu every single day. That was a really good, tribe, but it was in Lincoln and I
Hmm.
had time
Yeah.
then. And so you could go to like a lunch class and do all this other stuff. And then once that went away, it was like, all right, well, wee hours are pretty much all you got. And this quickly took over as that tribe. But once like having that COT, because you put on a certain face professionally, and this is as a leader, this is always true of any leader. You have to maintain a certain level of composure. There's certainly opportunities to be vulnerable, but there is a little bit of a hey, the way you carry yourself matters. And so being able to just kind of you know dump your emotional purse out right in the gloom and the COT and stuff like that that immediately was a draw
Yeah.
for me. So I think that's what like basically brought that fellowship piece in. It was like, okay, I can actually like seeing some of and the one that I won't say the COT, but it was a very good COT by Hard Hat that totally surprised me. It was not something that I would have normally related to, but as he said it, I was like, boy, that had a big impact on him. Like, I wonder why, and having him share that was just, it was really cool. And that was very early on in my F3 journey. So that was really cool. And that immediately, I'm pretty quick to trust people. And my wife's an attorney. So she's like the opposite. She's always like, careful what you say
Right.
and all this stuff. And she works for a software company in Omaha that lots of people know. So she's like, don't tell them anything about it and all this stuff. But, the gloom is really that place where you are able to do that. And that's so important to just get that off your chest and be able to have that
Yeah.
conversation. So yeah, that was really what drew me in. And then I was surrounded by good leaders. I think Baby Shoes actually started our shield lock,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, he's a young, hungry professional, which is really cool. And got him and I and Urkel and Baby and Patchy Adams all together as the hate group, which was hilarious. And an interesting bunch to say the least. But that was a good experience.
You know, I love what you said there because I think like the willingness and ability to get vulnerable is sort of the magic. But you feel like you jumped in, you sort of recognized that was the culture and then started sharing
Yeah,
openly about.
yeah, definitely started sharing more. I mean, it was because getting out of going from such a intense tribe where I mean that brotherhood is intense, especially in the infantry. I mean, the more it sucks, the more close you get with
Right.
the people, and that's why I think being in the Midwest with snow, it's like, hey, F3 Omaha is going to be strong because like that sucks, right? There's just nothing. There's no way around that, and shared misery builds a lot of camaraderie. So I knew that when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, I was just very lost because I had such a purpose before that. My whole life, I knew I wanted to be an infantryman in the Marine Corps. Didn't necessarily know I was going to be an officer or not, but like that was my life. That and a deacon. So I always knew I wanted a family. But um, so, I joined the Marine Corps, did that, and had a blast, but I never planned on doing more than 4 years. And as you get out, you're just kind of looking around. I remember I was running on the treadmill in this apartment complex, and I saw this larger build person, I believe female, with purple hair, walk out of their like apartment, and they had about a 2x2 square patch of grass. They had a little dog, and she was like smoking a vape or something, just like totally disheveled. I'm like 48 hours out of the Marine Corps, and this person looks disgusting. They're just not carrying themselves very well. And I'm like, oh no, what did I do? Like, where am
Yeah.
I? Right? Like, this is the real world. Now, this is in Lincoln, college town. People are finding themselves, whatever. But it was a shock, right? Like, that was not, okay, what did I do by
Right.
getting out? And so seeing, being surrounded by leaders in the community was so important for me because it was like, all right, I got to find a group of people who are going to help lift
Yeah.
me up. So and just make me better.
Well, the number of ways that you could find yourself with a group that is not going the direction you want to go, right, is like, it seems like it would be easier, right?
Yeah.
And so finding this group of
Right.
guys, and curious, when you say getting out, for maybe guys that haven't been through that experience, I mean, anything you would equate it to, or is it's sort of like you've been almost like if you were in prison for a few years and came out, like, is it that isolated, or I don't know, tell me more about that because I don't really.
Yeah, yeah. The leadership aspect of it can be isolating sometimes, but I was never a company commander or a battalion commander, and some of those levels could be very isolating. As a platoon commander, or even as a company XO, which is what I got out as, you have a fair number of lieutenants that you can kind of confide in, um, versus the Marine, because you can't, that's not the relationship between an officer and your enlisted guys. You can, do a lot of good stuff with them, and the Marine Corps, I think, does the best job of that, honestly. But I think I would equate it to having spent so much time working towards a goal, accomplishing it, and there is nothing else afterward. Like, whether you do 4 or 40, it's like once you're out, like, no one's gonna pay me anymore to be really, really good on a 240 Bravo machine,
Sure.
right? And I'm good on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can be very effective, but like that is completely no longer my
Right.
mission. And so not having a task, having a mission, having something to work towards, and learning what that's going to be. And then I'm having this conversation right now with a really good buddy of mine who just got out. It's okay. This was what I loved about F3 the most, I think. It's okay that it's not this giant, big pie in the sky thing. That was hard because I had held, my family who were all, I mean, my family had books written about them. There's so many storied, Marines out there. And I felt like my service time was kind of a letdown, right? Like, I did some really cool stuff, but I'm not in any books as far as I know. Right. And now my mission is just not that at all, but it's like the level that comes with being a good dad and being a good husband. And those things are actually way bigger than what I saw in the Marine Corps. But that's a hard realization for somebody in their 20s. That was freaking hard
Yeah.
for me, because it was not the grand, the man in the arena. You're not out there fighting the good fight. And what you do is potentially perceived as very mundane, but it will change somebody's world if you're good at it, right? Being a good dad or being a good husband. And so seeing so many examples of that really helped me because that's hard. I mean, that was like the gravity of what I was doing to how I perceived the gravity of what I was doing now. And I was way undervaluing it. So that shift was huge.
Interesting. I love that. And I think that, like, for men especially, right, where a lot of times our identity and our purpose become,
Right.
sort of meshed together. And I'm right
Yeah.
there with you, though. I think the struggle for me is the measurable things, like the things that I can measure or get feedback on, are like work and,
Right.
like, I don't,
Right.
my wife and daughter don't do performance appraisals with me. I don't know. I don't get raises from that.
Right.
There's no, like, the measurement.
Right.
And a lot of times for kids, it doesn't come for years, right? Till they're 18 or making
Right.
their own decisions. And you're kind of like, oh, wow, they're kind of smart. Maybe we taught them.
Turned out all right.
In terms of the shield lock,
Yeah.
how did you guys get started? Or do you think it just was kind of like you were vulnerable with some guys, they recognized they wanted to benefit from that shared accountability, and it just kind of organically happened? Or talk us through that.
Yeah. I think Baby Shoes and Urkel were probably the impetus there. And then they roped in the other two. I mean, we all had been kind of posting at the
Yeah.
same spots. so it was pretty natural, I would say. Like we all knew of each other. I think I knew the least about Patchy Adams, but obviously I mentioned his name and people fall over
Yeah.
laughing. So,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, he's a known quantity. And then got to know him a lot better in the Shield lot. But yeah, it was pretty natural. And I think we started with we were I'm trying to think of what we started with initially. Start with Why was the book, and we just kind of went through that, and that was actually kind of cool. And I had to make sure I didn't take
Yeah.
over because Urkel and I were the same age, but Urkel had some incredible experience, has some incredible experiences being a dad,
Yeah.
being a young dad, going through law school and all of that. And my experiences were heavy in leadership, so I could run this, right. I could teach this
Yeah.
class, and so I've read the book Start with Why, like great stuff. So I had to be pretty careful initially of not taking over, which was good. But I think it was also a good opportunity for me to, you know, give
Yeah.
to those guys, which I really
So,
appreciated.
so you did this book study? Did you like meet and do like a beat down and then coffee book study
Yeah,
kind of format? Or?
yeah, we would do it after a beatdown. We went to several different, diners around. We had lunch one time actually that worked because we're all young professionals,
Yeah.
so we're still establishing
Yeah.
ourselves in our respective industries. So, but we were able to do that. But otherwise, it was in the mornings, and that was always good. Then we had a group chat going and
I
everything
love
else.
that.
So,
That's really
yeah,
cool. And kudos to you guys for getting that together. I think that's one of the things we haven't fully tapped into across the region here, at least, is the getting guys, just get that small group of guys, and then other stuff that comes up, right? As life is happening, you're like,
oh yeah,
who did you go to when you were trying to figure out about moving and having your first kid, and
right,
that group becomes
yeah.
really a piece of how you operate. So, and you're still in touch with them today, it sounds like. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They're
Just
touch
from a
gals.
distance. They're texting all morning and you're trying to get work done, right? That's how mine goes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we definitely still have the
Yeah.
group chat going. So for better or
Well,
worse.
talk us through kind of the other piece of this, fellowship or the relationships, right? That you got like the concentrica model. So just curious if you notice any, I guess from your perspective, benefit of F3 maybe that it has on your relationship with your wife and now with your child.
Yeah, I think being deliberate with my M was the biggest thing, and it was funny because she was like, "You're coming home and you're like talking about all the stuff you're going to do for me now," and and it was weird. She's like, "What is this group of? What do you guys talk about? Do you guys
Yeah.
just talk about me?" And it's like, "Well, no, not
Yeah.
really, but kind of." So I think being deliberate with that, which our relationship is very unique. So we met my senior year in college and we did long distance for a little over 4 years. So I saw her
Wow.
12 times while I was in the Marine Corps in person, 12 times, which was
Yeah.
not easy. We got married by the time we'd been together for 7 years. So people were like, oh, you're newlyweds. And it's like, look, I called my wife once kind of like emotional on a sat phone in the desert in Oman, right? Like we we're not newlyweds. Sure, yes,
Right.
technically, right in the eyes of God and the state, but we've been through hell and back, and so we were just so happy to be in the same zip code. And that was we have a really strong relationship that I'm very happy with. But it's always good to come up with new ways to surprise her. She's an attorney; she hates surprises, so I love surprising her. It just cracks me up every time. But being deliberate about that and keeping that because it's so easy to get enveloped in your own, especially. I mean, all those things I listed off. I'm getting out of the Marine Corps, starting a new career, right? Trying to stay in shape. Those are all
Yeah.
me focused,
Yeah.
right? So it was great to have that. Hey, just a reminder, you do go home every day to somebody, and they really need you. You
Yeah.
really need them. So I really appreciated the directness
For
of
sure.
that.
And tell us about being a new dad. How's that going for you?
So the best, and I don't know how this advice is received by some people. I think I've been repeating it. So Griswold on the day, or maybe the week after my daughter was born, or right before, was like, "Hey, it's okay." And I needed this because I felt, my wife's cooking this baby, right, and I'm sitting there trying to help out my wife.
Yeah.
That's what I know. And then the baby arrives, and it was like, okay, this is different. So now she's 7 months old. She's a lot more animated. But initially, really, it was like, okay, I don't feel the same connection. And Griswold was like, and that's okay. Like they need, right? They're gonna be okay without dad. Mom's not.
Yeah.
Mom needs you, right? But like they need their mom for like the first several months, maybe years. But like there will come a day where you are, everything to them. And don't worry if it doesn't feel like the same level of connection as your wife, because she was physically attached to this human being for 9 months. And that was so incredible, just right place, right time, whether he knew it or not. But the way, like him telling me that made me feel a lot better, because I was like, am I just like heartless? Like what? I'm trying to figure this out. And people are telling me how great it is and all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay, like I believe, smashing the I believe button. But even in the last month or two, as she's gotten a lot more animated and she can laugh and do all this other stuff, it's already starting to come, you see it a lot more. At the airport, she recognized me, right? So, that stuff makes such a big difference. Excuse me. So that I really appreciated that advice from Griswold. That meant a lot to me, because him and I think in a lot of ways are very similar in just emotion and lack thereof sometimes. So I really appreciated that, and that's been cool, because she's really young, and I'm super excited to someday hopefully get her out of the balloon.
Well, I love that you said that, and I think that's one of these things where, like you said earlier, right, just by being open, talking about how you're feeling as you're going through these life transitions, you open the door for somebody to give you that sort of advice. I remember, I don't remember who, but when our first daughter was born, I was talking through it, and somebody was like, they're like, I get you, man. You feel like you have a complete stranger living in your house, right? Like you don't know, you've never met him before, and so I think it's really, it can be a tough transition, and I'm so selfish that I forget, sometimes I have to put my family first over my desire to work out or achieve a certain list of tasks or whatever. So it's always good to have guys to lean into on that. Hey, are you the type of guy that likes to get up early in the winter to battle your jester? Do you love listening to people drone on and on and on about COVID in the gloom? Would you trust your vision to a guy nicknamed Cataracts? Well, if the answer to any of these questions is yes, fellas, you have bigger problems than you think. Dr. Cataracts, aka Dr. Wolf, can't solve all of your problems, but he can certainly help you solve the problems related to your eye health and vision. You will find many F3 principles throughout his practice. Check him out today at Exclusively Eye Care. The other piece, so thinking about like that third F piece, and you kind of mentioned, I caught a little bit earlier on, you were talking about growing up in Catholic schools and some of that being your background, but walk us through kind of your faith or third F journey.
Yeah. So, this one was always very important to me and very private. Catholics are notoriously terrible evangelists. At least that's been my experience. So, I guess I loved the philosophy aspect of it. I had really good teachers in high school. My grandfather went to seminary and he loved philosophy, so he would talk about that. So that part was always really interesting to me. But on deployment, I was actually a lay leader, so a lay person who leads a service of some kind. So I really appreciated that time. And there were some times where I would have liked to have been a participant, just in the belly of that big old Navy ship, and having some real struggles. And that, having that hour a week meant a lot to me. And most times it didn't even last an hour. It was like 35 minutes, but just that time to unplug my brain and talk to God was super important. And it always bums me out, and I see it. I absolutely can see it, but I know there have been some certainly negative experiences with Catholic Church, with him and the gloom. And I think what's kind of kept me is the understanding that it's the rules are there for a reason, whatever, but it's operating within them and finding what you can, making sure that you're giving everything you can, and then seeking out people who are like you too, right? Not every padre is created equal, right? Just like not every minister is created. Like people, find somebody that they relate to. And I was very lucky to have very good spiritual leaders, for lack of a better term, and some people that I didn't get along with, so just didn't continue that relationship, right? But I was always able to find something, and that has always been very important to me. And I converted my wife. She was baptized Catholic but never practiced, so she went through, became Catholic before we got married, which was cool. And I think I have someone very close to me, very, very close to me, who's a recovering addict. And she was, kept her faith really helped get her through that. So, yeah, I've had very good examples. So I'm very lucky in that regard. And yeah, the faith piece for me really, I always appreciate when people bring it up because I'm not very quick to, right? Perfect example is Baby Shoes and Urkel, right? Baby Shoes will talk to you about it immediately off the drop of the hat. Like he loves to talk about it, which is good because I need that, right? Like I need somebody to have that conversation and be normal about it, right? And that piece is huge. And those are the people that I relate to, right? Like that's why we gravitate towards somebody who can be real with what their thoughts are on things, and how they're handling it. And that's so important. And I think I can see how sometimes people will lose that in the Catholic Church, that, it doesn't seem like this is relatable. But to that end, when I was rolling jiu-jitsu with this old guy down in Lincoln, started talking to him. Turns out he was a priest, which was awesome. He was beating the crap out of me. And I was like, "You're a padre?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he was like, "What are you talking about? I can beat you up."
I just want to work out, man.
All right. That's cool. So, and it was, I mean, like a very normal dude. He was like, "Yeah, I'm going turkey hunting after this." I was like, "Who are you?" Like, this is a real person. So, anyways, there are some good spiritual leaders out there.
I love it. Yeah, I think too, kind of what you mentioned there, making that a foundation for your marriage. And, I think what's so hard is like we're programmed to search for why, right? You mentioned that Start With Why book, and like we want to know the why, and sometimes we don't, like right now I feel like we're hearing all these guys asking for prayers for people with cancer, right? And like, man, if we knew why and we could solve the cancer problem, we would solve it. But it sort of is one of those things where you've got to surrender control, and just love people, cherish the moments that we have together. But I'm curious from your perspective too, as you're thinking about just your own life, and you don't have to share if you don't want to, but what, I mean, any examples of maybe things that you feel like having that relationship with a higher power has helped you get through? I mean, I imagine, I don't know, just even that transition, right, from that, military life to.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty terrible incident happen in the country of Oman. So when I called my wife, now girlfriend at the time, on that sat phone, 2 Marines ended up getting shot. We were doing a training exercise. It was dangerous. I recommended we don't do it. There's a whole investigation ensues. Was not fond of my leadership, and I know we'll talk about leadership here in a second, but basically got told to shut up and color. And so after being told that for 18 months, he stopped pushing back. Anyways, it ends up with these 2 Marines getting shot in the country of Oman, middle of the night. Terrible deal. Saved them both. They both lived. But it was a pretty gruesome scene, especially for me as a leader. And that was a jarring event, right? I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I mean, I was trained well. I didn't do anything special, but I was trained well. I fell back on what I was trained to do, and I did it, and helped get those guys the care they needed, and they lived. But that time, just because I felt so helpless as a leader, was I still have those journals, just notes I'd taken while we were out there, and I have them in a box. I thought about trying to fish them out, but I'm going to save that for another time. But that was a time when really, and I'm in this beautiful country of Oman, which looks a lot like the desert in California. So there's no light pollution. I mean, we're sleeping on a 40-foot by 40-foot concrete pad. There's 200 Marines on there, all nut to butt. I mean, it's a stinky square in the middle of the desert, and we're all just looking up at the beautiful stars. After that had happened, chain smoking cigarettes, and just like, you know, reflecting on what the heck just happened. And especially as the leader, you know, and I was the XO, but I still felt incredibly responsible for what had happened. And that was a time where, I mean, we were in constant communication, and you know, good Lord. So you don't need a sat phone for that, right? So that was one of those times because I just felt so helpless and it was so infuriating. I was so angry with what had happened, but also scared for those Marines, and just that whole situation. So that's probably the biggest one. And at the same time, I mean, we're probably 5 or 6 months into what ended up being about 8 months worth of deployment, and so my relationship with my wife, was hurting bad, right? I mean, really bad. We didn't have cell phones. We had email sometimes, and then I would call her from this. She was in law school too at the time. It was like a 27-digit phone number because it's the Navy ship, and it only works a very few amount of time, right? Like you got to pay for minutes. It's the whole thing. But she would, in the middle of one of her classes, get a call from me, and the Mediterranean Sea or somewhere crazy. And if she would miss it, she would just start bawling. And, so it was really hard. Like communication was so hard. And we know how important that is. And it's hard on deployment. And I was lucky to even have that. So there was just a lot going on. And that was one of the times where having my faith, I don't know what I would have done without it. That was so important to me because I had seen so many people fail. It's just like, holy smokes.
Man, powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. I love, I'm sure you could go on for days. I remember one time having coffee with you and man, you've got some great stories and perspectives. I think just to kind of segue kind of to the question about leadership, curious your thoughts on, and just your experience as a site Q at Dragon's Lair. What was that like? I know you've got a lot of, background in leadership. So I'd be curious your thoughts on like, how are we doing, kind of developing leaders or reinvigorating male community leadership? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the group comes at it from so many different angles, which I think is so important. Like we've reached a critical mass where there's every different personality type in the group. And you never know which one a young, soon to be leader is going to respond to. So, doing my VQ, asking to be SIQ, all of that was like a foregone conclusion, right? Like yeah, sure, absolutely. Like, let's do it. But that is not the case I found when I was a SIQ, asking somebody to do a VQ, or, just a Q even at all, potentially, if they just really weren't super comfortable with it. And maybe this is by design, but if you do it with a group around and there's peer pressure, right? Like somebody will say something that resonates with them, right? Everybody's going to be supportive, but just because you're supportive, right? I was supportive, right? I didn't say, hey, you should VQ. I bet you're going to blow it, right? I'd say, no, hey, I think you should VQ. You'd be great at this, right? But message sent does not mean message received. But because you have the group, you've got so many different messages coming in, and maybe that's overwhelming sometimes. But I think that really helps to make somebody feel like they can do it. And I saw that, and that was really cool for me to see, because I think I just assumed that certain people were good at this, purely based on age, right? Like there were some gentlemen some guys that I was like, why is this guy so nervous about? He's had the life experiences that I know he has to have had by having a spouse and 3 kids and job changes and all this stuff, and yet they're nervous about it. And I was like, that just seems so crazy to me. So, but they end up doing it, right? They end up stepping out of their comfort zone and they do it. So I think in that regard, F3 is incredible. I think, there's a lot of leadership in accountability and holding other people accountable. So that could be, having a hard conversation with somebody is always the hardest thing as a leader, I think, where, hey, you're not doing what you need to do. So I think encouraging that conversation is always important. But I would love to I seek with vigor mentors
Yeah.
all the time, like professionally, personally. Um, I love listening to really, really smart people, especially if they can break down super complex things relatively simply for me, and then I'll build up to their level, if you will, or
Yeah.
I'll attempt to. But I think there's a great opportunity there for the hay packs and the maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be the respect guys, but maybe they have more time if they're some of them at depending on where they're at in their career. But that could be a great mentoring program, and that's I don't know what that
Yeah.
would look like, right? Because that's kind of different from the F3 model where it is a group, right, as a whole. But I remember thinking that, like, man, that would be great if I had, and the onus is on me too, right?
Yeah.
I didn't ask, so it goes both ways. But I remember thinking, like, man, JC or Griswold or some of those guys would be great mentors for me, just
Yeah,
personally.
that whetstone sort of level of the concentrica. It's interesting because there's a lot of, I feel like, maybe it's unofficial mentoring.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes. And that is
yeah, because
absolutely
like
true.
you'll have like somebody will give a COT, right, and you're like, man, that hit right where I needed it to hit on
Right.
whatever day, and there's some mentoring there, but like,
Right.
I think especially from a career standpoint, there's definitely some guys that have some longevity
Yeah.
and some great experience. You mentioned JC for sure, Firewalker I think of too.
Yep. Yep.
Whew. Sorry, we can edit that out.
Now you're good.
Curious, just your in terms of Dragon's Lair and that site being a Saturday site. Talk to
Yes.
us a little bit about that. What were some strategies you had for keeping guys engaged?
Yeah. So I did not have to. I mean, that was an already very well engaged site. Miyagi's the man. That guy is, yeah, he's so cool. He is I mean, the opposite person. In a lot of ways, he is just so different than me. And yet, I feel like we meshed very well. Um, and I remember thinking, like, oh man, because early on, I was like, yeah, I want to be a PsyQ at some point, someday, right? And it's going to be the hazy, it's going to be the worst side. Nobody's going to want to come. I'm going to make it so hard every time. I'm going to get the Dip Brothers in back to back and, just kill everybody, right? And then I get Dragon's Lair, which is like 2.0s once a month at least, right? Costume workouts. Hey, Saturdays are for the low and slow run, right? Like, or what, and it was just so different from what I had expected or I thought I was going to get. And it was so much better. I don't think I had been to a 2.0 workout until I went to one at the Lair as the PsyQ. And that was so cool. That I remember, and it was cold too for one of them, and all the kids are bundled up. And my wife's like, "No way, there's going to be kids. No kids are going to show up." I was like, "I bet you there's 2.0s there. I bet you there's a couple." And there was tons. And she was like, "How old was the youngest?" I was like, "I don't know,
Yeah.
4 or something." Like 4 or 5, like young. There were some young kids for the pumpkin patch one, and it was just like, wow, that was so. And so seeing those guys interact with their kids, I think our baby was 2 months old at the time. So seeing them interact with them was so cool, and that was really fun. So I got something totally different out of it than I ever would have thought. I had this picture in my mind of, yeah, we're just going to run, basically to, Sarpy County and back, and then we'll do 1,000 push-ups and we'll be done. That'll be it. And it was not that at all, and it was so much better. I mean, lots of games. Well, so my daughter was born like on my week 2. I don't know. Have you heard this story?
Yeah.
So yeah, week 2 of me having the site, um, where it's Griswold's 3 year, and it was pouring rain. So we're playing soccer and had a great time. Drank a couple of brews in the parking lot, and then we go to coffee. And this is all at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Go to coffee. I open up my center console. My phone's in there with about 20 missed calls from my mother-in-law. Lots of yelling. And she's like, "You're, B's in the hospital," and stuff. So I go to the hospital. Our daughter was born that day, which was
You
awesome.
didn't
I
miss it though, right?
Right?
You were there. Yeah.
I didn't miss anything. No, I didn't miss anything. But I came into the hospital soaking wet, smelled like beer, yelling, "Where's my wife?" And they were like, "Sir, she's fine. Are you okay?" Right? Like, you look like an insane
That's
person.
funny.
I mean, I smell, I'm soaking. Just, it was a mess. Like sopping, like this, like
Yeah.
sticky feet into the emergency or into the hospital. So That was funny, but yeah, that was an interesting experience for sure. So the layer was not at all what I thought I would get as a site Q or what I would want, but it ended up being exactly what I needed at the right time. I mean, I think that might have been the morning when Griswold said that, gave me that piece of advice. So it was
That's
important.
cool.
So
That's awesome, man. Full circle for sure.
yeah,
Curious if
yeah.
there's anything else on your mind as you think back about the last couple of years or your journey. Anything that maybe we didn't cover that you would want to share?
I think being, and this comes back to the not having the insane grand idea behind what it is that we do, and what we do as him every day is grand, if we do
Mm,
it well, right? If we are a good dad and a good husband, like that really, and with that comes just making small changes, drinking a little less. Like that's one thing that, I mean, I did everything to the extreme,
yep. Yep.
right? And I've really cut down on that a lot. And being able to make those more small changes, and how seeing that impact, it's like, okay, not everything has to be a monumental 75 hard, and that's my lifestyle now. And F3, I think, is such a great place to do that and to fail, and then to get back up and come back, and guys will push you, right? There's enough of a push, to where it stings a little bit, but not so much where you don't feel like you're welcome back. Like I will never, I have no doubt that will be true.
Yeah.
So, being able to, it's a good place to fail, and to improve. So I really appreciated that, and it was what I needed at the time. That is
Yeah.
for sure.
Man,
So
I love that, and that's it. It's so simple but so important to remember to do what's right in front of you every day and do it well.
right,
I think society and social media, right, definitely puts this idea in our minds that it's got to be grand, and sort of
right,
fame becomes a little bit of an idol. And I think of the number of ways, right? It's like we start thinking how many guys showed up to my queue or to my site as a site queue, or how
right.
it could be. There's so many ways that there's pressure on us to want to be
Yeah,
grand. But I think just it's okay, to live a simple, ordinary life,
yeah.
but to do it really, really well. So that's I
Right.
needed to hear that today. So appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like just current state? So you guys you're living in, where are you living at?
So Enterprise, Alabama. It's a small town about 90 minutes north of Destin,
Okay.
Florida. So we're way south,
Okay.
South Alabama. So it's right outside of Army base. It used to be called Fort Rucker. Now it's called Fort Novosel. So Army helicopter pilots get trained here. So
Okay.
it's pretty cool.
And things are going well. I mean, you look good. You're wearing a suit,
Yeah.
right? So you got a job, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And the leadership challenges there have been fun because, I mean, working as an advisor, it was all me, me, me. And now being a district advisor and leading a team of advisors, the mindset
Right.
shift, right? So that has been an awesome experience. Lots of improvement quickly, which that's what
Yeah.
matters, right? It's not where you start, it's where you finish. So, I mean, just in the last 3.5, 4 months, I've had a lot of opportunities and had great mentors. So, and a good team, right? That has given me a lot of grace.
That's awesome.
My leadership style can sometimes have a little bit too much Marine Corps in it, so they help me take it down every once in a while, which
Yeah.
is good.
Well, so curious, where do you need prayers or encouragement these days, just with where you're at with your family and life?
Yeah, I think refocusing, because with the move came a lot of focus
Mm,
on me, uh, and so, and I have spent a lot of time focusing on me. So prayers for myself and my wife and our
sure.
relationship. Just a reminder to put that at the front. With the baby, it's easy. She's
Yeah.
adorable. It's fun, right? That's that part's going well. But just a reminder to put my wife, my Am, in
Yeah.
where she's
Yeah.
supposed to be.
Pray for a date
So
night. You guys need a good babysitter and a
yeah,
date
we
night.
do. We really do actually. That's a good. We haven't
Yeah.
had one,
There you
so we had one night away from the baby,
Yep.
and that's it. And it was with a group.
Okay. Well, we'll put that on the list. Well, I appreciate you, man, and just
All right.
I think you're a good
Yeah.
example of why the age thing doesn't matter, because I think I've learned so much from you and your experiences and just your willingness to share. So I just want to continue to encourage you. I think there's a verse in Timothy somewhere that talks about don't let age be a deterrent. But I
Right.
think you're a phenomenal leader, and I love what you're doing with your family, and just appreciate you. So thanks for your time today. We'll do a little Namerama. I'll start us off here. Brandon Flehardy, 38, The Plague.
The Plague. Marshall Lane, 29, Taxman.
Taxman. And we say hate, but was there ever a call sign, or did they ever come up with what is it? What's the Taxman call sign?
What? Pay up. That's
Penny
what it
up.
was.
Oh, penny
Pay
up.
up. Yeah,
Love
yeah.
it, man. Awesome. I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for your time today. This has been great.
Absolutely.